Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
Dear listeners, welcome to this episode of Facing the Moment. As we all know, sooner or later, physical illness enters nearly every life. Sometimes it arrives unexpectedly. Sometimes it unfolds slowly over time. Sometimes, and most sadly, it lingers and threatens to end or snuffs out one's life prematurely. It may come in the form of a frightening diagnosis, a chronic condition, an autoimmune disease, a debilitating injury, unexplained pain, perhaps, or an illness that medicine has not yet been able to help heal. Whatever its form, illness rarely affects only the body. It can alter our sense of identity, our relationships, our ability to work, our future-facing plans, and even our understanding of ourselves. It often brings uncertainty, grief, frustration, fear, loneliness, and the exhausting question of what tomorrow may bring. It is deeply challenging to experience or live with pain and not be affected by it. For many people, the emotional burden becomes nearly as difficult to carry as the physical symptoms themselves. Yet, amid these realities, certain questions quietly emerge. How do we keep illness from becoming the dominating story of our lives? How do we continue loving, contributing, finding meaning, and experiencing moments of joy, even when our health demands so much of our attention? How do we hold on to hope without denying reality? And how do families walk alongside someone they love without losing themselves in the process? To help me parse out these questions, I'm honored to be joined today by Nancy Sowell, who has devoted much of her professional life exploring those questions. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to spending this time with you.
Likewise.
And it's one of my favorite topics.
Thank you.
So yay.
And to our listeners, let me say, whether you are living with illness yourself, caring for someone who is, or simply desiring to be better prepared for whatever life may bring, I hope this conversation offers you not only insight, but also comfort, practical wisdom, meaningful tips, and hopefully reasons to keep holding on. Allow me for a moment to introduce our guest. Nancy Sowell, MSW, LICSW, is a solo lead IFS trainer, a consultant, a clinical supervisor, and a psychotherapist with decades of experience serving individuals, couples, and groups. Nancy has completed advanced trainings in multiple modalities and has focused her efforts on behavioral medicine, integrating aspects of body and mind. She serves as a teaching associate at Harvard Medical School through the Cambridge Health Alliance. Nancy is a lead co-author of a new book on IFS health therapy and has co-designed, planned, and co-authored a key proof of concept RCT research paper on IFS therapy as the adjunctive treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. And that was the first quantitative IFS research paper. Thank you, Nancy. Perhaps just as importantly, as you will learn, this is not merely an area of professional expertise for Nancy. For her, this is deeply personal. Nancy will help us today explore how to remain fully human when our bodies no longer cooperate as we wish. Again, Nancy, welcome. What else might you like to share about you that I didn't capture in this brief intro?
I'm not sure. I mean, that was a lot.
Well,
but
that's
I
you.
guess, yeah. I mean, I guess just that I'm really glad for anyone who's here, who's experienced a chronic illness or an injury or disability from aging. And I just want to welcome you And I want to say my heart is with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's begin the conversation with a broad question. Why do you think physical illness can shake us so deeply? And I don't mean just physically, I also mean emotionally and even spiritually.
Because it changes us. It changes our lives. It changes our identity. It changes our ability. And it changes our relationships. It might affect one's sexuality. It affects all aspects of our lives and our body. And our body is our home of our self. And when we have an illness, it calls into question, can I trust my body? It brings up issues of mortality. Yeah, so it really can shake someone to their core. Let me think a moment if there's more I want to say about that. It brings up a lot of fear about the future. We can no longer be certain about the future. And it changes how we are viewed in the world by other people. And it can change how we're viewed by ourselves too. So to me, it makes sense that it would change us. And there's a whole process of adjustment that needs to happen. And yeah, which we'll get into more and more today. Is there more about that?
No, I think you captured it. I like the metaphor that our body is our home. Actually, it's our true home, and people say it's our temple. So when that's shaken a little bit, our whole existence, goes into question. We develop doubts and concerns. So I get what you're saying. And maybe to set the stage, if you don't mind, might you share with us your own personal story with psoriatic arthritis? How did that diagnosis enter your life, and how might it have changed you?
It was a very difficult time. I was getting symptoms and I didn't know what was happening. I also had a misdiagnosis. I was reaching out for medical help to get diagnosed and treated. And the doctor that treated me thought it was something other than what it actually was. And it took over a year to get an accurate diagnosis. And meanwhile, I was getting worse and worse and worse. And I was doing everything that I was told to do. But it really did shake me to my core, because it changed how I felt like I couldn't trust my body. And I didn't understand what was going on. I felt a loss of control. I had taken pride in my physical capacity. And I also had been working out. I was a runner. I was used to running around with children and friends, and suddenly I couldn't do that anymore. And so there was a real change in my identity, and a lot of feelings that came up around that.
Might you share some of those emotions that may have surprised you most during those early months or years?
Yeah, and it was not the same day to day. On some days I would feel really down and I would just want to escape, which was very unlike me. I didn't want to be in my body. I didn't want to feel the pain I was feeling. I think probably the most frightening emotion for me that was coming up was shame, which I really didn't expect, because intellectually, I had my behavioral medicine training already when I got sick. And so I knew that it's not a shameful thing, but boy, I really learned about chronic illness from the inside and what it's like to be the one experiencing it, and what it's like to be thought of as a patient, what it's like to be sort of people maneuvering around you and to not be treated the same way as other people. And the shame was just shocking to me, that I felt ashamed of my disability. I felt ashamed of just how I was moving through the world. And so that was the hardest thing for me, And it wasn't something I wanted to acknowledge. That was the other thing. I didn't want people to know I felt that way. And I wasn't sure who I could really talk with about it. It was really hard because I felt it brought up all of my fear about who I was in the world and without my ability. And I really became very sensitive to what it's like to experience disability.
Yeah, I'm guessing there was a loss of freedom, loss of independence,
Of course,
loss of certainty. Besides those things, have you seen your own clients or yourself experience other losses as you grieve, these losses we're talking about?
sure. Like even worries about making a living. Some people are very dependent on their body. Their work might center around what they're able to do physically. And suddenly you have to really make all these adjustments. And yeah, my clients often experience things very similar to what I did. And people have different reactions. And I had different reactions, and they weren't the same day to day. There's a grief process. Mm-hmm. There might be real sadness and grief one day. There might be anger another day. But it's not all about that, too. There's also a tenderness that can happen inside, a different kind of meaning making. There's a whole shift in relationships. What seems superficial can begin to fall away. And you're left with really what matters to you. And also this adjustment, this continual adjustment. And life can feel like it needs to get smaller, but actually life can get bigger and work to include the illness rather than shrinking your life and isolating you. So, but what I want to say about that is for a time and on certain days, that's okay. It's okay to take time to recover. It's okay to take time to feel sad. And, the full breadth of human emotion comes up for people, for myself and for my clients, all of it. And just an awareness of the people that are most important to us and it sort of sorts it out. Relationships change. The people I wanted to hang out with changed. And I also looked at my life and how I was living and had to consider what changes I want to make. And I made some really big changes in my life.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd like to maybe explore fear a little bit, because clearly when one is in that state, there's fear of pain that might stay with us longer than we desire, obviously. Fear of progression, how this disease or this illness might evolve. You mentioned disability. So an important question often to explore is, how can we learn to live with uncertainty, with that fear, without becoming consumed by it?
Yeah.
Because it's natural to be in that state of fear. Question is, how do we navigate?
Right, exactly. And people that are dealing with an illness and there is uncertainty about the future, what I want to say about fear is that it is natural. So it's exhausting to fight fear or any natural feeling that's coming up under the circumstances. So there was sort of a shift that there is a shift that can happen, and there was a shift that could happen for me, that in some ways I needed to befriend my fear, because when I didn't befriend it, I could be consumed by it. Right? So I really learned that actually being able to validate it, I actually felt less afraid. Right? So when I'm talking with my clients about fear, maybe the first time we talk, I'm the one validating it, because they may be in it, just consumed by it in that particular moment. But something begins to shift where they actually can be the one to be with it in a different way, right? So that rather than being in it fully, being with it with kind of learning to be the calm in the storm of everything that's going on around you.
Mm-hmm. I like this notion of befriending. I've heard colleagues and some family members telling me that they befriended the illness because, if we're unfortunate enough to get cancer, let's say, the first thing we want to do and the first thing the medical professionals want to do is to fight it. And of course, we want to fight it. But then on a spiritual level of sorts, on some emotional level, people seem to want to befriend it so that they can maybe lessen its emotional impact on them, as strange as this may sound. So I'm curious, if this is one way that people pursue, new approaches they adopt to prevent illness from becoming their entire identity, for having, from stopping illness from taking over.
Yeah. So befriending the illness, I think it's not something I expect. And it's not something, it really varies from person to person. So I want to meet people where they are. And around my symptoms and my illness, I wanted people to meet me where I was. And I might have days when I needed to just be mad about it or I was afraid of it. But I think there is something about befriending the fear, because it is a natural emotion. And the whole issue of befriending the illness, I think, is very personal. So I leave room for however people are, whatever works for them will make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did.
Because
like I said, it sounds strange when people say that.
Yeah.
Or said that to me. I don't know how common it is. And it took a while to really absorb it. I understood befriending the fear. I had issues with befriending the actual disease, because it's something that's happening outside the norm,
And some people do that, Toufic, but there also can be a certain pressure that people feel, a social pressure that they feel to actually do it a certain way. And even when we talk about illness and chronic illness, and even in sort of well-intentioned wellness community advice, it can be an imposition because it can come with shoulds. Like what I don't want and what I didn't want was somebody telling me how I should feel, like I should befriend this, or I should do that, or I shouldn't eat this, or like that is not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think so it really is very unique for each individual and even day to day.
Yeah. And I think go ahead.
And that's it. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yes, it probably varies from individual to individual and probably varies from situation to situation.
Yes.
Right? Because in the common parlance, we say people may be living with cancer, right? So this notion of living with creates this image, or this maybe this invitation that how could you maintain some normalcy in your life or some new sense of normalcy with this chronic disease, right? But let's shift a little bit and talk about situations where the pain or the symptoms persist, yet no compelling diagnosis is given. So on top of the actual disease, there's this frustrating situation where you don't have an answer, right? And I'm sure this also triggers some new emotions and maybe behavioral responses that you may have experienced yourself or with others. Might comment on that.
Yeah, it's what can happen is that people feel like they're not being believed, And actually, the worst thing that can happen around that is that they're not being believed. And that it's because healthcare providers, including therapists, physicians, I mean, healthcare providers are in the business of helping people feel better. And if they haven't succeeded in that, that doesn't feel good inside, and that can leak out in the relationship with a client, right? So people can feel not believed or even blamed, or maybe they're afraid that they're being blamed or they're not sure. So, but treatment, I mean, how we're treated in relationally really matters. There can be, so when there's no clear, like, structural damage, there can be a feeling of being blamed or even shamed for having the symptoms. And often people don't understand. But there is a way that we don't have to do that to ourselves. And if that is happening, then that, again, that is something that we can validate, that whatever emotion is coming up, I want people to feel like, I want them to know it's an understandable response to what's happening, especially if in the outside world, you're not getting validation for what you're experiencing and people don't know how to help you. Right. So there is always a certain validation that can be available inside. And that is what IFS Health Therapy is about, is helping people find that within themselves so that they're not, so that any part of us that might be or thought we might have that is a blaming thought, we can actually find out where that's coming from and what the good intention is. Because I do believe that everything going on inside is going to make sense once we understand it. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole lot I could say about that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but there is, I mean, medical science right now is understanding more, especially about chronic pain, where there is no structural damage. And it doesn't mean at all that it's not real. And people will misunderstand, and especially people that, I mean, this is fairly new science, and there has been a real shift in chronic pain and how we think about chronic pain scientifically, but it's very new. And there's a lot of people out there that don't know about this change, that chronic pain can exist without structural damage, that there can be this sensitivity that occurs in the central nervous system and in the body around how we process pain and how we process emotional pain and physical pain, and how there's a loop that can happen around that. So
I'd like to spend a few moments on this very point, Nancy,
okay.
if I may, the relationship between physical pain and emotional suffering. Right? I mean,
yes.
Are they connected or are they different? How? I mean, what do we know from the scientific research?
They are very
that connection.
They're very connected. They actually, physical pain and emotional pain activate the same regions of the brain, which we can see on fMRIs, right? When somebody's experiencing that, and that's really significant. And the brain, and the brain can learn pain. So this is like, we could spend a podcast just on this topic. I just want to say that. But the brain can learn pain, and it can also, there's something called predictive processing. Have you heard that term?
Yes.
So the brain makes predictions about what to expect, right? So our whole history follows us into our adult health. Everything we've been exposed to, all of our genes, our parents' genes, their experiences, a lot of that crosses over and gets passed down to us. And we can learn ways of coping that can get passed down to us. And so everything we've been exposed to, every chemical, the air we breathe, all these things that are beyond our control, societal ills, all of that affects our health. And all of that has something to do with this connection between trauma and the social determinants of health and health risk factors. So that when we're talking about chronic pain, when we're talking about chronic illness, we want to really broaden our understanding about what contributes to that. And there's so much that's beyond our control. So this issue about shame and blame, I always come back to whatever it is we've experienced, like with my clients who feel like, am I causing this? Or they have felt blamed. I might be getting off track, but I want to finish this. When we experience that, it's important to just think about our history. And the question that I ask people is, does it make sense, knowing what you know about yourself, that thought would occur at this point under these circumstances when you're sick? Does that make sense to you? And the answer to that question is always yes, when we really dismantle it and look at, what have I experienced in my life? What am I experiencing now in pain, especially the interconnection between chronic pain and emotional pain and chronic physical pain? Because whatever we've experienced, we're going to learn how to cope with that. And all of the ways that we learn to cope with that follow us to where we are now. So like I can kind of get a beef with the wellness community because there's a whole lot of shoulds that come out of that, and people end up feeling blamed for that. People can end up feeling blamed for their pain. Because the shoulds are not actually about, I don't think they create well-being. I think they create stress, more stress for people. And what I really, really believe helps people is reducing their stress, right? And not just their external stress, because there's so much of that we're not in control of, but internal stress. Our internal vulnerabilities create sort of conflicts that can happen inside, sort of counter emotions that can happen, that in an effort to try to cope with the vulnerability or keep the vulnerability at bay, right? And so those kinds of inner conflicts that are very understandable when there are things in the world that are impinging on us and that have hurt us, and our predictive processing about what's safe and what's not safe, and feeling unsafe with chronic pain comes up, right? So we really want to help people to meet that from a place of curiosity, calm, acceptance, and really listen to it and understand that genes are not destiny. What happened to us is not destiny. The adverse childhood experiences that correlate with health risk is not destiny. That there are things that we can control, and it has to do with what's going on inside of us emotionally. I just said a whole lot. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I wanted to stay on one piece that I thought you said, and if you didn't say enough about it, I'd like you to elaborate, and that is what I'm calling the reverse cause effect. We've been talking about, physical pain causing emotional stress, and we might get into some vicious cycle of sort. I want to now try to say, okay, could emotional stress, the inner conflict you're referring to, maybe even what some models refer to as legacy burdens, generational trauma that hasn't been resolved, could those emotional states cause physical pain? I mean, often we say autoimmune diseases aren't explained well in the medical literature, in the medical practice. And people often say, oh, it's stress related. Certain skin conditions, people say they're stress related.
Right.
So I would like to explore that a little bit from your research and from your experience.
Yeah.
Could these unresolved emotional burdens affect our physical well-being without suggesting that illness is someone, all in our heads?
Right. Well, there's a real connection between internal stress and our nervous system and external stress, wherever the source of stress is, right? Our internal stress is usually a result of external stress that we had to deal with, right? And so we learn in a multiplicity of ways how to deal with that, and that's a natural, healthy way of being. But once we're out of a situation and we persist in some of those strategies, it comes at a cost to our bodies and our minds. And there is this interaction. So emotional pain and physical pain are interact. They are in they're in a loop. There's a mutual influence that occurs. It's bidirectional. Right. So emotional, because it's the same brain centers that get activated.
Yeah. It has to go somewhere, right?
Right. They influence each other.
Yeah.
I don't think I would use the word cause, because we're learning a lot about, and there's a lot we don't know about mechanisms yet.
Right.
We're learning more and more about that. But there definitely is a mutual influence that occurs.
There's an association. Yeah.
Yes. And that's actually good news, because it means that if we can quell chronic stress, which is very different than acute stress, and I have a whole lot to say about that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to say it?
Well, I mean, you're saying if we're able to parse them out, if we're able to separate them, then you finish your thought, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, all stress is
chronic. Yeah, especially when it comes to chronic stress.
Yeah,
because some people experience, let's say, anxiety as a result of it. Some people don't experience anxiety, but their body experiences anxiety in the form of migraine, or maybe lupus or something else that hasn't been yet explained. So that's what I'm trying to really get a handle on.
Yes.
It's like you said, bidirectional, from physical to emotional, from emotional to physical.
Right. And so with chronic stress, it will keep our autonomic system activated, right? So that meaning like fight or flight response, or which is the most frequent, but it could also be freeze and shutdown response, right? So ultimately, what we want is to return back to balance. It's all about balance. So with chronic pain, with chronic illness, what we can control is bringing our whole system, our mind-body system, back into balance, right? Which might involve making certain decisions in our lives that we're in control of. There's so much we're not in control of, but there are some things we are in control of. For me, a really big thing around chronic stress was discovering I had a real problem with the word no. I was terrible at saying no. So I was chronically overextended. I also, and there's a whole lot of social factors that get involved here. I was raised to be a caretaker of people. And I was raised to think that giving was virtuous and receiving was selfish. That was a problem. I have some control over what I believe now, right? So, and I'm really committed to living a life that's more in balance. And not only that, but the fear, I'm afraid that if I don't, I'll be sick again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're talking about the effects of family culture and adopting our beliefs wholesale. Whereas as an adult, we have the opportunity to take a look at that.
Right.
As rationally as possible and make choices.
Yeah.
Choices that will serve us that maybe, couldn't have served us otherwise, or didn't serve us when we were younger.
Right.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the family culture too, right? Because the family culture is influenced by the larger culture and the dominant culture. And what that might have done to our family and to our parents and to our bodies and their bodies, right? All of that, all those isms out there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if we can go more specific and help listeners navigate these moments of physical pain, these moments of emotional stress that might cause physical illness. So what's the first thing you tell someone to help them prevent the illness from consuming the full extent of their time, attention, identity, etc.? How would you guide them? Because right now the pain is right there.
Right.
The physical pain is blistering, right?
Right. I mean, the first thing is treating them with dignity, not treating them in any kind of, just really understanding that what they're first of all, validating it and understanding that what they're dealing with is very difficult, right? So there's that. They need to know that I get it. And then, so first, I want to be the non-anxious presence in the room. I want to be the person who isn't scared so that they can feel held, emotionally held for whatever's going on with them. And it has to start with me as a clinician. I have to be able to do that, which means I need to actually work with my own system so that I'm not scared. And then in that context of a calm, safe space, it's much easier for them to turn toward whatever is going on inside, like turn toward the pain and begin to listen to it. Whether the pain is going to be both physical and both emotional, right? And even emotional pain is going to show up physically. It's like in our feelings, and they happen in the body, right? And if you grew up like I did with a lot of kind of chaos and hard things, I learned to actually ignore my body and the signals I was getting, and as a lot of my clients have, right? So I had to learn how to actually come back into my body, meaning be consciously aware of my body and listen to my body. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to adjust what I'm doing for my clients. So some people that are experiencing a chronic pain or chronic illness are actually loath to be in their body, because who wants to be in a body that's hurting, right? And just distraction might be, or avoidance of that might be where they're at. But when we do that, it can help in the short run, but hurt in the long run. So anyway, by being the calm presence with them, their system starts to settle down. And when that happens in the connection, there is a shift that happens. The nervous system starts to relax. Just in saying the truth and being understood, it starts to relax. And when it relaxes, then they begin to have access to their own inner core of calm and understanding and curiosity. So I might, like the first thing, like you asked, what's the first thing? I might say to them, let's invite whatever feelings you're having. In IFS, we might call it parts, but whatever feelings you're having, whatever thoughts you're having, whatever fear-driven thoughts are going on, into the room with us, whoever's here with us, inside of me, inside of you, let's invite them to just hang out with us and feel this safety in this room right now between us. That might be the first thing I do. I don't think there's any one thing all the time, but when they're ready to turn toward it themselves because they feel safe enough in the room with me, and they can access some of that calm or curiosity inside of them, I'm going to have them start to notice and focus on what's happening inside and learn and find out more about it. What thought goes with that? Are there any memories that go with that? What are the feelings that go with that? How do you feel toward that? Is there anything that's needed or wanted inside of your body from the calm that you have right now or the interest you have right now? And that things begin to shift when people are approached that way and when they approach the illness or the pain that way.
So fast forwarding, so they go along with that, and they start to realize something is shifting for them. Maybe the pain is still there, but they're responding to it differently. It's not taking over. Over time, what practices would be helpful to them? I mean, maybe think about your own experience going back to your early days with psoriatic arthritis.
Right.
What practice has helped you personally, navigate that moment?
Practices that bring me into balance. Like for me, it's like literally yoga helps me because it's about balance. Like even recently, I finished the book and now I have time to go back to all my yoga classes. And now I can get back to doing my tree pose, So, yeah, but it's all about balance and also like learning to say no, making time for nature, learning that being self-sacrificing too much is actually irresponsible. The whole business about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help the person next to you. To me, if I don't do that, I feel like I'm actually being unkind to myself and irresponsible. So that's something that when someone asks me to do something, even if it's a wonderful thing, if it's too much, it's not going to be helpful to me. And and so that's a practice, is being discerning and sorting out what's most important and precious to me in my life. And I help my clients to figure that out too, to really decide. Like nature is critically important to me. The experience of awe, and to most of my clients. For some people, it's art or it's music. For a lot of us, it's all of that.
And what I'm hearing, Nancy, is that you are encouraging people to just accept that they are in a challenging situation first.
Yes.
And look for self-care during that period. If it's downtime, if it's separating a little bit from the day-to-day, it's okay.
Right.
Because we are struggling in that moment, and it's okay to recognize that.
Exactly. Like there are still days when I'll be home and I'm not productive. I let myself be unproductive. There are days when I just want to watch. I had a client that was not doing well and was really in suffering, and said, and was very into a lot of sort of practices, and said to me, you know what my yoga practice is now? My yoga practice is watching TV, because that is what helps me to relax right now. And that, as I listen inside, sometimes that is what I need in a moment. And I understand that. And I think that's okay.
Say more if you don't mind. And maybe you already said it, but I'm stuck on one little scenario.
Okay.
Where someone, is in a situation where the illness may never completely disappear.
Yes.
Whether it's something terminal or not terminal, but chronic, and there's nothing that contemporary medicine can do about it. How do we help that person, whether a loved one or a colleague or a friend, let's forget about how we're going to help them, how they're going to help themselves, accepting this. Because the natural thing is to be in disbelief.
Yeah.
Right? And be frustrated about it. Like you said early on, angry about it. Why me?
Right.
So how do we help that person help themselves in that moment and during that very, very long haul?
Well, the first thing I would say, let's stick with the why me, because that gives us a really specific something to work with. I would say, okay, so you're asking why me, and that makes sense to me because not everybody has this, and you're dealing with this, and it's not getting better. So I want you, and as soon as I'll ask. So from my statement, it makes sense to me. I would say, does it make sense to you that you would be feeling that way? And the reason I ask that is because it actually is once removed, right? Because as soon as it makes sense to them, there's a little bit of space between the feeling of why me and something else inside of them, right? There's a little space there, a little breathing room that happens. And then I might help them to take that in, that how I feel makes sense. And there may be a way that some of the time they're fighting with the illness, right? And again, it's sort of like, do you know Aikido or like martial arts, where like when you push something, if you block it, it pushes more. Where if it pushes against you and you're flexible, it can move aside. There's movement there. That's exactly how this works. I'm basically describing what I call unblending, but just having a feeling or a thought that's painful, that someone might be perseverating around. And the validation is like the movement, right? And it can even come with the breath. Like sometimes I'll have people just invite that, just start breathing with that feeling inside, that part of you. Just start breathing with it, like as almost like an acknowledgement. I am here with you. Let's just hang out here together, right? My hope is that people feel more connected inside themselves to what's going on. And there's more validation and understanding, and even rage or frustration is acceptable, right? But in that moment of where there's that little opening, then light and air can start coming in there, and it doesn't have to take over. It doesn't have to fight for validation. Right. And this whole thing about shoulds, that's another thing. I don't want people to be what I call shoulding on themselves, because then because if you move over to a side where all these shoulds are happening, there's always going to be a counter move to rebel against it.
Sure.
And then they're just living, that's that chronic conflict, which causes chronic stress. So that's why I'm saying there needs to be room for everything. Like there need to be days where you do call in sick at work and you do just binge watch a TV series or something, or whatever your thing is. But it's not something that you're going to do every day, but it gives your body and your mind and a chance to come back into some kind of balance from all the shoulds. Right.
And getting away from these rigid beliefs. Right?
Yes, exactly.
And because, you're talking about being more flexible, right? So
Yes.
the pain is like that punch, and if you stop it, it might break your fingers. But if you
Yes.
go with it, you might weaken its effect. So
Yes.
I'm understanding very well where you're going. So let's shift a little bit to families and communities, because
Okay.
physical illness does affect the entire family, right? So, and there may be some misunderstandings that go on, some judgments, like you said earlier. What do you think loved ones often misunderstand about the daily experience of their loved ones living with chronic illness? I want to try to understand the families.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for people to understand that there is a whole sort of change in somebody's life that actually is also stressful. Just having an illness, there's doctor's appointments, there's trying to continue living, making adjustments in how you might have to transportation, or there's just a slew of things that they have to keep track of, managing pain, getting to doctor's appointments, taking medication, doing exercises, adjusting how they go about life, all of that, and it's exhausting.
Navigating insurance issues.
Yes, exactly. There's so much. I mean, we could probably generate a long list of what is required of people who are sick. So sometimes people don't understand that. They don't really get that it's all consuming. Like with lots of folks with cancer, it is all consuming. But lots of chronic diseases can be that way for quite some time. And also that it's not, like sometimes people who are trying to support them might give unsolicited advice or do comparison or say, there's this, so-and-so has this thing and they're doing this. Like that stuff is not usually helpful because it leaves the person feeling, they might end up feeling compared or criticized, right? And so I would say if you're trying to figure out how to be there in a helpful way, don't make assumptions, ask. And don't assume it's going to be the same day to day, because it won't be. There'll be days when they might want to be left alone. There may be days when they really want, companionship, or they really want to tell you what's more about it, or they just want to connect and not be a patient. They don't want it. Having an illness, you don't want to be treated like a patient all the time, right? And you remember that to still invite them, even if they say no a lot, continue to invite them, and just treat them like their self rather than like this sick person, and give them, grace helps. Just the grace to say no, to be accepted, to be understood, to be asked, what do you need? How can I be helpful today? And it's not the same every time.
Yeah, so resist the temptation to fix anything, because
exactly
the medical folks aren't able to, perhaps, just like you're saying, show care and compassion and presence. Just be there. You mentioned companionship, just be there, because that's probably what they need if they're willing for you to be there.
Right.
And not take it personally if they say no, right? So.
Right. But there's one other really important thing for caregivers, and that is it's very important to not give from a place of depletion.
So how do we do that?
Okay.
Share with us ways for caregivers to continue with their care without being depleted themselves.
Have a community. So for caregivers and people who are sick, connection, social connection with people who understand, who know what you're going through. Stay connected and spend time with them, and take time for yourself as much as you can. It can be very hard, especially when people are raising children or have busy jobs and all kinds of commitments. But it's very important to listen. Resentment is very important to listen to, because resentment is a signal that I have an unmet need that I need to take care of. It's not a bad thing to feel it, but it's a warning. that we're getting out of balance.
Yeah, that's where the grace comes in, that I can hear it
Yes.
without taking it personally and
Yes.
being bent out of shape. So just a word, maybe more than what you said about colleagues, workplaces, communities. I mean, there may not be caretakers by definition, by role and responsibility, but they also play some sort of a role in helping us navigate our own pain and illness. What might you suggest colleagues, friends in the workplace and the community do?
Again, I would say don't assume what they need, and don't assume what they can do or can't do. Ask. So that is probably the most important thing, and to not be afraid to talk about it. A lot of people are afraid to bring it up, like somehow it's not okay. But and if you're not sure, ask. Like just stay open and ask them what they need, and it may change from day to day. Right. So there may be things that you can do, but check it out. I think that's probably the most important thing. And to treat them like someone, treat them like their self, like a whole person, not a sick person, which is a tricky thing to say because, yes, sometimes some accommodations need to be made, but and should be made. But it should be something that is important to that person and not something that you're assuming that they need.
I know we're coming up to the end of this very engaging hour, Nancy. I just have a couple more questions.
Okay.
And I'd like to give you a moment to share with us the central message that your upcoming book on IFS health therapy conveys to the reader, to the extent you can, condense it into a central message.
Yeah, I would say that the central message is there's a few different factors that are very important. And one is that healing, which is living in balance and I would call it well-being, is not dependent on cure, and well-being is always available. And it occurs in that internal relationship to whatever's going on inside, and that inner capacity for self-compassion, for understanding, curiosity, calm, that is always available. And there are certain parts of or emotions or thoughts that might be coming up that that are not particularly helpful or that are coming at a cost, but that can be understood. And understood meaning that they have a purpose. There's an effort there and a good intention. And once we understand that everything is understandable and that there is no blame, and there's a connectedness to the body and to all that we are from a place of kindness and acceptance and being connected. So that connection inside and the connection that's possible outside in community is also extremely important because it's a relational healing model. IFS health therapy is a relational healing model. There's an inside connection, an inside relationship to all that we are, and then the external relationships and a flow between all of that.
Thank you for that, and congratulations on this major milestone, and all the best with the book and its readership. Finally, let me ask you, if listeners ought to remember only one idea from today's conversation, the next time illness enters their own life or the life of someone they love, what would you hope that idea would be? What would you like them to remember?
I would say remember remember your internal wisdom. Remember who you are, fundamentally are. Apart from all of the superficial external stuff, come back to your core where your your innate wisdom and your capacity for compassion and for understanding exists. And when you can't access that, that's a good time to be around the people in your life who can and could help you, right? So to lean into them and to surround yourself with that kind of support as much as you can. And there's a lot of resources out there. If you Google pretty much any illness or chronic disease, there's some organization somewhere where people are gathering and talking. Find that for yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank our listeners for sticking with us throughout this episode. I think what we attempted to do today is to explore how we may keep illness from taking over our story when it enters our lives.
Yes.
And our goal was not to find out how to beat illness or stay positive per se, or heal ourselves, even though, of course, would like to see that happen. Instead, my conclusion is that we needed to understand better how to keep meaningful, connected, like you said earlier, dignified lives when illness demands so much of our attention.
Yeah.
What we may have learned is that illness may change the course of our lives, but it does not have to define all of who we are, the whole of who we are. While we cannot always choose the condition our bodies face, we can learn new ways of responding to fear, befriending fear, like you said earlier, uncertainty, loss, and pain. We can discover unexpected sources of resilience, which, as you said, also lies within. We can strengthen the relationship that sustain us, the connection you talked about. And we can remember that even in seasons of profound limitation, dignity, purpose, compassion, and belief in our capacity to navigate adversity remain within reach.
Yes.
And I think you emphasized it's very, very important to remember that. So I really want to thank you, Nancy, not only for sharing your professional knowledge, but also for the generosity you showed by taking us along your own journey. I think conversations like this remind us that expertise becomes especially powerful when joined with lived experience. And I want to tell my listeners, if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who may be living with physical illness or caring for a loved one who is. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person is simply the reassurance that they do not have to walk this path alone. And if you're willing and able, please donate what you can to foundationifs.org so we can keep this podcast going. And I send you fortitude and hope, always. Talking about hope, Nancy, I'll give you the last word. What gives you hope at this moment?
Oh, the hope for me just resides in this feeling of well-being that is always available. I mean, it might not be, it's always possible. Let me say that. It's not always accessible, but it's always possible because that we own that and we can own that. Yeah, that gives me hope. And that everything human to me is really understandable, and that gives me hope. And as soon as people feel understood, they do feel better. The connection.
Nancy, thank you so very much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Toufic. It was my pleasure. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.